Jake Morrison sat in the back corner of the huge meeting hall, trying not to feel small. The chair was too big for him, made for the tall crystal beings who ran most of the Galactic Council. His Earth Fleet uniform looked old and worn next to all the shiny robes and fancy armor around him. The meeting hall was massive, bigger than any stadium back on Earth. Thousands of aliens sat in curved rows that went up and up toward a domed ceiling that showed the stars outside. Jake had been coming to these meetings for 3 years now, and he still felt like he didn't belong. "The human request for full membership is denied," said Ambassador Crix, his crystal body flashing blue with authority. The Zephyrian stood 12 feet tall, his voice echoing through speakers that made it sound like thunder. "Their technology is too simple. Their military is too weak. They have nothing useful to offer this council." Jake felt his jaw tighten. He wanted to stand up and argue, but he knew it wouldn't help. The council had made up their minds about humans long ago. They saw Earth's ships and thought they were junk. They looked at human weapons and laughed. To them, humans were like children playing with sticks while adults used laser swords. Queen Zatara clicked her mandibles in agreement. The insect queen was as big as a small car, her black shell gleaming under the lights. "The human fleet has only 200 ships," she buzzed through her translator. "My hive has 10,000 bioships. Why should we treat them as equals?" More voices joined in. The floating energy beings called ethereals whispered agreement in voices like wind chimes. The rock-like granite lords rumbled their approval. Even the shape-shifting flux made sounds that the translators turned into mocking laughter. Jake had heard it all before. Humans were too young, too primitive, too violent, too peaceful, too many things that meant the same thing. Not good enough. Finally, Jake stood up. His movement was small in the huge space, but his microphone picked up his voice and sent it through the hall. "I'd like to speak about the missing ships," he said. Ambassador Crix's crystal face turned toward him, blue light dimming to show annoyance. "The human observer may speak, but briefly. We have important matters to discuss." Jake felt the weight of thousands of alien eyes on him, but he pressed on. 7 human colonies have gone dark in the past month. No distress calls, no evacuation. Signals, nothing. Our ships found empty stations with no signs of fighting. Something is taking our people. Perhaps they simply left, suggested Minister Vex, one of the ethereals. His voice was like singing crystals. "Humans are known to be restless." "We found their ships," Jake said. "Drifting empty in space, no crews aboard. These weren't evacuations. Something took 40,000 people without leaving any trace of how or why." Queen Zatara's mandibles clicked in what Jake had learned was the insect version of a shrug. "Human problems require human solutions. The Council protects civilized space." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. "These attacks are happening near your border worlds too. Whatever is doing this won't stop with humans." "Impossible," Ambassador Crix said, his crystal body flashing brighter. "Our sensors would detect any threat. Our fleets patrol constantly. If something was dangerous enough to threaten Council space, we would know." "Your sensors didn't detect the ships that took our colonies," Jake pointed out. "Because there were no ships," said Chancellor Morp, a blob-like being who spoke through a mechanical voice box. "Humans have wild imaginations. You see threats where none exist." Jake tried a different approach. "At least let us share our sensor data with your analysts. If I'm wrong, you'll have proof that humans jump at shadows. If I'm right, we can work together to stop whatever this is." The hall filled with alien chatter. Jake caught fragments through his translator. Waste of time, human paranoia, primitive fears. Ambassador Crix raised one crystal hand, and silence fell. The Council appreciates the human concern, but we cannot waste resources on ghost stories. Your membership application is denied. You will remain as observers only, with no voting rights and no access to our military data. Jake's hands clenched into fists. You're making a mistake. The only mistake, said Queen Zatara, would be treating humans as our equals when they clearly are not. As the meeting moved on to other topics, Jake heard Ambassador Crix talking quietly to other council members. The microphones weren't supposed to pick up private conversations, but Jake's translator caught a few words. Let the humans guard their little corner of space. When real threats come, real civilizations will handle them. Jake gathered his papers and left the hall. In the corridor outside, he met Admiral Lisa Carter, Earth's military representative. She was a tough woman in her 50s, with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. How did it go? She asked, though Jake's expression probably told her everything. Same as always, Jake said. We're too primitive to be trusted with real information, but somehow smart enough to handle our own problems. Admiral Carter nodded, grimly. I've been getting more reports. 3 more colonies went silent while we were in that meeting. Whatever is out there, it's moving faster now. They walked toward the human section of the station, a small area near the cargo docks that the Council had given Earth for their representatives. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. What do we do now? Jake asked. Admiral Carter stopped walking and looked out a window at the stars. We do what humans have always done when the universe tries to kill us. We figure it out ourselves. Jake followed her gaze to the blackness between stars. Somewhere out there, something was hunting. The Council thought humans were too weak to matter, but Jake had a feeling they were about to learn how wrong they were. Contact Fleet Command, Admiral Carter said. Tell them to mobilize everything we have. If the Council won't help us, we'll handle this alone. And if we're in over our heads? Jake asked. Admiral Carter smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. Then we'll make sure we take whatever is out there down with us. That's what humans do. As they walked away, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the Council's dismissal would cost more than just human lives. But for now, all he could do was warn his own people and hope they were ready for whatever was coming out of the dark. 3 months had passed since the Council meeting, and Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Ranger, staring at something that made no sense. The Epsilon research station floated in space ahead of them, all its lights on, all systems running normally, but no one was answering their calls. Take us in slowly, Jake told his pilot, Lieutenant Ben Clark. The young man's hands were steady on the controls, but Jake could see the tension in his shoulders. Everyone on the bridge felt it. Something was very wrong here. The Ranger was one of Earth's newer patrol ships, though new was relative when you were dealing with a military budget that most alien civilizations would spend on decorating their bathrooms. She was tough and reliable, built with human engineering that focused on function over beauty. Her hull was thick steel and ceramic. Her weapons were simple kinetic cannons that fired chunks of metal really, really fast. I'm reading full life. Support throughout the station, reported Chief Martinez from the sensor station. But no biosigns. No people anywhere. Jake frowned. A research station that size should have had 300 scientists and support staff. Any signs of damage? Hull breaches? Nothing, sir. The station looks perfect. They docked carefully, Jake leading a small team aboard in full environmental suits. The airlock cycled normally, and the corridor beyond was clean and well lit. Their footsteps echoed on metal flooring as they made their way to the main laboratory section. What they found was impossible. Workstations were still active, screens showing research data that was still updating. Coffee cups sat half empty on desks, still warm. In one lab, Jake found an experiment in progress. Automated systems still running tests on mineral samples from the nearby asteroid belt. It's like they just stopped, said Sergeant Amy Foster, Jake's security chief. She was examining a personal tablet someone had left on a bench. Look at this. Jake looked at the screen. It showed a personal message half-written. Hi, Mom. The research is going great. We found some interesting energy. Readings in Sector 7. The team thinks we might have discovered a new type of... The message stopped mid-sentence. Check the security footage, Jake ordered. They found the security office and pulled up the recordings from the past week. For 6 days, everything looked normal. Scientists working, talking, eating meals in the cafeteria. Then, on day 7, something changed. Jake watched the footage with growing unease. At exactly 14:32 station time, every person on the station stopped what they were doing. Not gradually, not one at a time. Everyone everywhere at the exact same moment. In the cafeteria, people stopped eating mid-bite. In the labs, researchers stopped speaking mid-word. In the living quarters, people stopped brushing their teeth, reading books, even stopped in the middle of taking showers. Then, they all started walking. Calmly, quietly, they all moved through the corridors toward the docking bay. The footage showed 300 people filing onto the station's transport ships in perfect silence. No one spoke, no one resisted, no one even looked confused. The ships launched and jumped to hyperspace, leaving the station empty. That's not possible, Sergeant Foster whispered. People don't just do that. But Jake was already thinking about the other missing colonies. New Sacramento, where a mining operation had vanished overnight. Port Liberty, where a farming settlement had left crops rotting in the fields. Haven's Rest, where families had abandoned their homes with dinner still, cooking on the stoves. Get me everything, Jake told his team. Research data, personal logs, sensor readings. I want to know what these people found in Sector 7. Back on the Ranger, they analyzed the data while traveling to the next missing colony. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Earth's best xenobiologist, joined them by hyperspace communication. Her face appeared on the main screen looking tired but alert. The energy readings are unlike anything we've seen, she said, studying the Epsilon station data. The pattern suggests some kind of artificial intelligence, but operating on frequencies that human brains aren't supposed to be able to detect. Could it control people somehow? Jake asked. Theoretically, yes. If something could broadcast on the right neural frequencies, it might be able to override human consciousness. But the technology required would be incredibly advanced. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's air conditioning. Advanced enough to make our people walk onto ships and fly away into space? More than advanced enough, Dr. Rodriguez confirmed. Jake, if something out there has that kind of power over human minds, we need to warn everyone. This isn't just about missing colonies anymore. Jake nodded grimly and opened a channel to Earth Fleet Command. Admiral Carter's face appeared on screen, her expression already serious. Admiral, we need to mobilize everything we have, Jake reported. The colonies weren't attacked or evacuated. The people were collected. Something is harvesting humans. Admiral Carter's eyes hardened. How many ships do you need? All of them, Jake said. And we need to warn the Council. Whatever did this won't stop with human colonies. I'll send the fleet to back you up, Admiral Carter said. But Jake, the Council has already made it clear they think we're paranoid. They won't listen to warnings about invisible enemies. Jake looked at the data streaming across his screens. Energy patterns that hurt to look at too long. Radio signals that seemed to whisper at the edge of hearing. Whatever was out there, it was like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Then we make them listen, he said. 2 days later, Jake stood before the Galactic Council again. This time, he brought evidence. The security footage, the energy readings, the research data from 3 different missing colonies. He presented it all clearly and methodically, showing the pattern of disappearances. Ambassador Crix's crystal body flickered with impatience. The human observer presents interesting data, but nothing that proves an external threat. Perhaps these colonists simply chose to relocate. 300 people don't relocate by abandoning their coffee mid-sip, Jake said. Something is controlling human minds and taking our people. Queen Zatara's mandibles clicked dismissively. Humans have always been easily influenced. Perhaps they were convinced to leave by other humans with better offers. The energy signatures we detected don't match any known technology, Jake pressed. Not human, not any council species. This is something new, something dangerous. Minister. Vex's ethereal voice was like cold wind. The human fears what he does not understand. There are many phenomena in space that primitive sensors might misinterpret. Jake felt his temper rising, but he forced himself to stay calm. At least authorize joint patrols. If I'm wrong, you waste a few days. If I'm right, we can stop this before it spreads. The Council has more important matters than human ghost stories, Ambassador Crix declared. Your request for military assistance is denied. As Jake left the Council chambers, he felt the weight of 40,000 missing people on his shoulders. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, something was hunting. The Council thought humans were too primitive to recognize a real threat, but Jake knew better. He just hoped they would figure out how to fight it before that thing decided to expand. Its hunting grounds. Jake Morrison had seen a lot of strange things in his years exploring space, but nothing had prepared him for the ships that emerged from hyperspace at the edge of human territory. They didn't reflect light the way normal ships did. Instead, they seemed to absorb it, creating holes in space that hurt to look at directly. Contact on sensors, reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the tactical station. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the uncertainty underneath. 3 vessels, unknown configuration. They're not broadcasting any identification signals. Jake studied the main screen of the UES Ranger. The ships were massive, each one easily twice the size of his patrol vessel. Their hulls were black, but not the flat black of stealth coating. This was something deeper, like looking into empty space itself. Try standard first contact protocols, Jake ordered. All languages, all frequencies. For several minutes, they broadcast greetings in every language known to the Galactic Council: human English, Zephyrian crystal song, the buzzing clicks of the Hive Queen's people, even the mathematical patterns that ethereals used for communication. The response came not through their radio systems, but directly into their minds. Jake gasped as alien thoughts crashed into his consciousness like cold water. Images flooded his brain, stars going dark, planets stripped of all life, vast ships moving between galaxies like hungry predators. With the images came concepts that human language had no words for, ideas that made his head pound with pain. Around the bridge. His crew was reacting the same way. Lieutenant Kim held her head in her hands, blood trickling from her nose. Sergeant Foster was gripping her console so hard her knuckles were white, her eyes wide with terror at thoughts that weren't her own. Through the psychic static, Jake caught fragments of meaning. Harvest proceeds, inferior species cataloged, higher forms detected in core systems. "Break contact!" Jake shouted, though he wasn't sure if he said it out loud or just thought it. "All stop! Reverse engines!" The Ranger began backing away from the alien ships, but Jake could feel the alien presence following them, pressing against their minds like invisible hands reaching into their skulls. Commander Alex Turner, Jake's tactical officer, managed to speak through gritted teeth. "I'm picking up communication patterns in the psychic noise, some kind of language. It's like they're talking about us." "What are they saying?" Jake asked, fighting off waves of nausea as alien thoughts tried to rewrite his memories. Alex worked at his console with shaking hands, running the psychic signals through the ship's translation computers. "They call themselves... It's hard to translate. The closest human word would be devourers. They're saying something about harvest schedules and processing." Jake felt ice in his veins. Processing. Like the missing colonists were crops to be gathered and used. The alien ships began moving toward them, and Jake saw something that made his blood freeze. The vessels weren't just black. They were shifting in and out of normal space. One moment they were solid objects on his sensors, the next they seemed to exist only partially, like ghosts made of metal and hunger. "They're phasing, Lieutenant," Kim reported, her voice tight with pain. "Moving in and out of our dimension. Our weapons can't lock on to them." "Can we outrun them?" "I don't think so. They're matching our speed without even trying." Jake made a decision that would haunt him for years. "All ships, scatter pattern. Maximum burn to the jump point. We need to warn Earth." As the Ranger accelerated away from the alien vessels, Jake felt the psychic pressure increase. The Devourers were angry at being denied their prey. Images flooded his mind. The missing colonists, their life force being drained away to feed alien hunger. He saw vast biomechanical processing centers where conscious beings were kept alive while their souls were slowly consumed. "Jump drive ready?" reported engineer Tony Stevens from the engine room. "We can make the jump in 30 seconds. Those 30 seconds felt like hours. Jake watched on his screens as the Devourer ships pursued them, phasing in and out of reality like nightmares. Every few seconds, beams of dark energy lanced out from the alien vessels, missing the Ranger by mere meters. When one of those beams grazed their port shield, Jake felt the ship shudder. Not from impact, but from something deeper. It was as if the beam had tried to drain the life from the ship itself, pulling energy from their reactor, power from their systems, even warmth from the air. "Jump!" Jake shouted. Reality twisted around them as the Ranger leaped into hyperspace. For a moment, Jake could still feel the alien minds pressing against his consciousness. Then they were gone, leaving only the familiar hum of faster-than-light travel. In the medical bay, Dr. Patricia Wong checked the crew for injuries. Everyone had nosebleeds, headaches, and what she called psychic trauma. Memories that didn't belong to them, thoughts in languages that human brains weren't designed to understand. "How many of them are there?" Alex asked, holding an ice pack to his forehead. Jake looked at the data they'd gathered during the encounter. Energy readings that spiked off their instruments, gravitational distortions that suggested massive fleets moving just outside normal space, radio signals that hurt to listen to, broadcasting across frequencies that spanned multiple dimensions. Too many, Jake said quietly. Way too many. The Ranger jumped back into normal space near Earth's outer patrol line. Jake immediately opened emergency channels to Fleet Command, sending everything they'd recorded to Admiral Carter and Dr. Rodriguez. Admiral Carter's response was immediate. All ships code black emergency. Unknown hostile contact confirmed. All personnel to battle stations. But Jake knew their small fleet wouldn't be enough. The Devourers had ships that could phase out of normal space, weapons that drained life itself, and psychic abilities that could control human minds. Earth's kinetic weapons and steel armor seemed primitive against such power. Dr. Rodriguez analyzed their sensor data and came to the same conclusion. These beings are ancient, she told Jake over a secure channel. Their technology is millions of years ahead of anything in Council space. They see biological life as food, nothing more. How do we fight something like that? Jake asked. I don't know if we can, Dr. Rodriguez admitted. But Jake, you need to contact the Council immediately. If these Devourers are what I think they are, they won't stop with human colonies. They'll consume everything in the galaxy. Jake prepared another urgent message to the Galactic Council, but he already knew what their response would be. Demands for proof. Accusations of human paranoia, dismissals of primitive fears. The Council had ignored human warnings before. Now Jake had to find a way to make them listen, because the alternative was watching every living thing in the galaxy get fed to an alien hunger that had been growing in the dark for millions of years. As he composed his message, Jake looked out at the stars and wondered how many of them had already gone dark, their worlds stripped clean by the Devourers. The galaxy was bigger than humans had ever imagined, but now Jake realized it might not be big enough to hide from what was coming. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was called within hours of Jake's report reaching civilized space. For the first time in decades, every species had representatives present, their various forms of concern filling the great chamber, with a tension Jake had never felt before. Ambassador Crick stood at the center podium, his crystal body flashing anxious colors. The human claims are disturbing, he admitted, but we need more than sensor readings and stories of mind control. Jake had uploaded everything, the footage from Epsilon Station, the psychic recordings from their encounter with the Devourers, even brain scans showing the lingering effects of alien mental intrusion on his crew. But he could see in the aliens' faces that they wanted to believe this was still a human problem. The beings you describe, said Minister Vex, his ethereal voice wavering with uncertainty. Their abilities seem impossible. No known species can phase between dimensions at will. No known species had that power until now, Jake replied. That's what makes them so dangerous. Queen Zatara's mandibles clicked nervously. Even if these Devourers exist, they have only attacked human colonies. Perhaps they see humans as easier targets. Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but before he could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the council chamber in red, and automated voices announced in a dozen languages. Station under attack. All personnel to emergency stations. The main view screen activated, showing the space around the council station. Jake's blood went cold as he recognized the dark shapes materializing from hyperspace. Devourer ships. Dozens of them, their hulls absorbing light as they moved toward the station with predatory grace. That's impossible, Ambassador Crix whispered, his crystal form flickering with fear. Our sensors showed no approaching ships. They phase in and out of normal space, Jake said grimly. Your sensors can't track what isn't there. The first attack came without warning. Dark beams lanced out from the Devourer vessels, striking the Zephyrian crystal ships that formed the station's outer defense. Jake watched in horror as the beautiful, delicate vessels simply dissolved. Not destroyed by explosion or fire, but drained of the very energy that held their crystalline structures together. All ships engage! Queen Zatara buzzed into her communicator. Defend the station! The Hive Queens. Bioships swarmed toward the attackers like angry insects. These were living vessels, grown rather than built, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. They moved fast and struck hard, but when the Devourer's draining beams touched them, the bioships simply died. Their lights went out. Their movements stopped, and they drifted lifeless in space. The ethereal energy beings tried to attack the Devourers directly, leaving their ships to engage in pure energy combat. Jake watched through the view screen as beings of living light fought against the dark alien vessels. For a moment, it looked like they might have a chance. Then the Devourers began absorbing the ethereals themselves, feeding on their energy like vampires drinking blood. This can't be happening, Minister Vex whispered, watching his people being consumed. We are beings of pure energy. We cannot be eaten. But they could be. And they were. Jake saw entire ethereal squadrons vanish into the black hulls of Devourer ships, their light extinguished forever. In the middle of the slaughter, a single Earth fleet ship dropped out of hyperspace. The UES Defender, commanded by Captain Nancy Brooks, one of Earth's most experienced officers. The small patrol vessel looked insignificant next to the massive alien ships, but it began firing immediately. Unlike the energy weapons of the Council species, the Defender's kinetic cannons fired chunks of metal accelerated to incredible speeds. When those projectiles hit the Devourer ships, something unexpected happened. They actually caused damage. How is that possible? Ambassador Crix asked, staring at the view screen. Mass-based weapons, Jake realized. They can phase shift energy, but solid matter still affects them when they're partially in our dimension. The Defender's attack drew the attention of 3 Devourer ships. They converged on the human vessel, their draining beams focused on its hull. Jake watched as the ship's shields failed, as power drained from its systems, as the hull began to buckle under the psychic assault. But Captain Brooks didn't give up. Even as her ship died around her, she kept firing. Her final torpedo barrage struck a Devourer vessel's weapon array, causing the first visible damage any Council species had inflicted on the attackers. The Defender exploded in a flash of nuclear fire, taking 200 human lives with it. But it had proven something important. The Devourers could be hurt. The battle ended as quickly as it had begun. The surviving Devourer ships phase-shifted away, leaving behind a debris field of destroyed Council vessels and the floating corpses of thousands of beings. The great station that had housed the Galactic Council for centuries was now a burning wreck, its population centers breached and lifeless. In the emergency bunker where the Council members had taken shelter, silence filled the chamber. The proud species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia had been brushed aside like insects. Only the humans had managed to fight back, and they had paid for it with their lives. Jake stood before the assembled representatives, many of whom were injured, or in shock. Now do you believe me? He asked quietly. Ambassador Crix's crystal body was cracked and dim. The attack came from nowhere. Our early warning systems detected nothing. Because you're looking for energy signatures and hyperspace distortions, Jake explained. The Devourers use dimensional phase technology. They exist partially outside normal space until they choose to attack. Dr. Elena Rodriguez appeared on the emergency communication screen, her face grave. I've analyzed the attack data. These beings aren't just advanced, they're ancient beyond our comprehension. They've been moving between galaxies for millions of years, consuming entire civilizations. Queen Zatara's voice was barely a whisper. How many are there? Based on the hyperspace distortions we detected, Dr. Rodriguez said, thousands of ships, maybe tens of thousands. And this was just a scouting force. The implications hit the Council like a physical blow. If a small Devourer fleet could destroy their strongest defenses so easily, what would happen when the main invasion arrived? We need to mobilize every ship, said Chancellor Morp, his mechanical voice box crackling with static from the attack. Every world must be warned. To do what? Jake asked harshly. Your energy weapons are useless against them. Your shields can't stop their draining beams. Your sensors can't even see them coming. Then what do you suggest? Ambassador Crix asked, his pride finally broken. Jake looked around the chamber at the representatives of species that had dismissed humanity as primitive and worthless. Now they were asking for his help, but he could see in their eyes that they still didn't understand what they were facing. You need to listen to humans, Jake said simply. We're the only ones who hurt them. Our weapons work because we still use kinetic energy instead of pure plasma. Our minds resist their psychic attacks because we're too stubborn to give up. And our tactics work because we don't fight fair. What are your terms? Queen Zatara asked, the words obviously painful for her to speak. Jake thought about Captain Brooks and her crew, dying to prove that humans could fight back. He thought about the 40,000 colonists who had been harvested like cattle. He thought about the galaxy that had ignored human warnings until it was almost too late. Full membership in the Council, he said. Equal voting rights. Combined. Fleet command under human leadership. And immediate technology sharing. We need your manufacturing capability, and you need our weapons and tactics. The silence stretched for long minutes. Finally, Ambassador Crix spoke. And if we refuse? Jake gestured toward the view screen, which still showed the wreckage of the most powerful fleet in known space. Then you face them alone, and they'll consume every living thing in the galaxy, starting with the species that refuse to work together. One by one, the Council species agreed. They had no choice. The quiet humans they had ignored for so long were now their only hope for survival. As Jake prepared to coordinate the galaxy's defense, he couldn't help but think how much blood could have been saved if the Council had just listened to human warnings from the beginning. But there was no time for regrets now. The real war was just beginning. The war room beneath Luna Command had never seen so many brilliant minds gathered in one place. Admiral Lisa Carter stood at the head of a table surrounded by Earth's greatest military strategists, scientists, and engineers. The holographic display above them showed the galaxy divided into zones of control, and too much of it was already going dark. The Devourers have taken 12 more systems in the past week, reported General Frank Shaw, his weathered face grim. 3 Zephyrian crystal worlds, 4 Hive Queen breeding colonies, and 5 mixed species trading posts. No survivors, no distress calls. They just disappear. Jake Morrison, now promoted to fleet captain after the Council Station battle, studied the tactical displays. The pattern was clear and terrifying. The Devourers weren't just attacking randomly. They were systematically harvesting the most populated worlds first, gathering the greatest amount of life force with each strike. "What do we have to work with?" Admiral Carter asked Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who had been analyzing captured Devourer technology from the battle wreckage. "It's not good," Dr. Rodriguez admitted, her voice tight with exhaustion. "Their ships exist partially in what they call null space, a dimension parallel to ours. When they phase shift, our energy weapons pass right through them. Only kinetic. Weapons can affect them because mass exists in both dimensions. So we need bigger guns," said Commander Alex Turner, Jake's tactical officer. "Not just bigger," Dr. Rodriguez corrected. "Smarter. Their phase shifting isn't random. There's a pattern to it. They have to synchronize with our dimension to attack, which means for split seconds, they're vulnerable to conventional weapons." Lieutenant Sarah Kim, the young physicist who had become Jake's science officer, leaned forward excitedly. "What if we could predict those synchronization points? Time our attacks for when they're fully in our space?" Dr. Rodriguez nodded. "That's exactly what I'm thinking. But the timing would have to be perfect. We're talking about windows measured in milliseconds." Engineer Tony Stevens, who had somehow managed to keep the Ranger running through 3 impossible battles, scratched his beard thoughtfully. "I might be able to build something. We'd need quantum processors to calculate the timing. But if we could sync our weapons to fire at the exact moment they phase in..." "How long would that take?" Admiral Carter asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3. "If we're lucky," Stevens replied. "But we'd need resources from the Council species. Our manufacturing capacity isn't enough for what we're planning." Admiral Carter activated the communication array, connecting with the Refugee Council representatives who had set up temporary headquarters on Earth's moon. The leaders of species that had once dismissed humanity as primitive were now living in human-built shelters, protected by human-commanded fleets. "What do you need?" Ambassador Crix asked immediately. His crystal body was still cracked from the Council station attack, but he had adapted to his reduced circumstances with surprising grace. "Everything," Admiral Carter said bluntly. "Manufacturing, facilities, quantum computers, exotic materials, and about 10,000 of your best engineers. We think we found a way to fight the Devourers, but we need to build new weapons from scratch." Queen Zatara's mandibles clicked nervously. "Our biofactories can produce whatever you need, but the quantities, it would take months to build. A fleet large enough to matter." "Then we don't build a big fleet," Jake said, an idea forming in his mind. "We build a smart one." He activated the tactical display, showing the distribution of human and council forces across the galaxy. "The Devourers expect conventional warfare, big fleets meeting in open battle, but humans have never fought conventionally. We're ambush predators, not herd animals." Dr. Rodriguez caught on immediately. "Guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run attacks, using small, fast ships equipped with phase-sync weapons." "Exactly," Jake continued. "We can't match their numbers, but we can be unpredictable. Strike where they don't expect, when they don't expect, using weapons they can't defend against." Admiral Carter studied the proposal with a strategist's eye. "It could work, but we'd need perfect coordination. One mistake and our ships get consumed like all the others." "That's where human training comes in," Jake said. "Council species fight with honor and tradition. Humans fight to win. We teach their crews to think like us, chaotic, adaptable, willing to break every rule if it means survival." The next 3 weeks became the most intense period in human history. Earth's shipyards worked around the clock, building new vessels that combined human engineering with alien technology. The ships were smaller than traditional council vessels, but they were fast, tough, and equipped with revolutionary phase-sync cannons that could punch through devourer defenses. More importantly, human instructors began training alien crews in what Admiral Carter called human combat doctrine. It was a difficult transition for species that had fought the same way for thousands of years. "Forget everything you know about honor in battle," Jake told a group of Zephyrian crystal pilots. "The devourers don't care about your traditions. They want to eat you. Your job is to make that as difficult as possible." The crystal beings struggled with concepts like false retreats, ambush tactics, and what humans called dirty fighting. But when Jake showed them footage of their homeworlds being consumed, they learned quickly. Queen Zetara's bioship pilots adapted faster, their insect-like minds already comfortable with swarming tactics. "We understand pack hunting," the Queen told Jake during one training session, "but humans take it to levels we never imagined." The breakthrough came when Lieutenant Kim solved the phase synchronization problem. Her quantum targeting computers could predict devourer phase shifts with 89% accuracy, giving human gunners the split-second timing they needed to land effective hits. "It's not perfect," she admitted during the demonstration, "but it's enough to level the playing field." The first test came when a devourer scouting force attacked the Centauri system. Instead of meeting them with a traditional fleet formation, Jake led a squadron of 12 experimental ships in a coordinated ambush. The human vessels emerged from asteroid fields and nebula clouds simultaneously, their phase-sync weapons firing in perfect coordination. 3 devourer ships were destroyed before they could react, their dark hulls torn apart by kinetic rounds fired at precisely calculated moments. The surviving aliens tried to phase shift away, but Jake's squadron had positioned themselves to cover all escape routes. For the first time since the war began, a devourer force was completely eliminated without losing a single human ship. "How did you know where they would try to escape?" asked Commander Elex, a Zephyrian officer who had been observing the battle. "Because that's what I would do," Jake replied. "Humans think like predators. We know how prey behaves when it's cornered." News of the victory spread through the remaining Council worlds like wildfire. For the first time since the war began, the galaxy had hope. The Devourers could be beaten, but only using human tactics and human leadership. Admiral Carter began deploying the new squadrons across the galaxy, each one led by human officers, but crewed by volunteers from every surviving species. They called themselves wolf packs, small, fast units that struck without warning and vanished before the enemy could respond. But Jake knew this was only the beginning. The Devourers would adapt to their new tactics, and the real invasion force was still coming. They had bought time, nothing more. As he prepared for the next phase of the war, Jake couldn't help but wonder what the galaxy would look like when it was over. The proud Council species were learning to fight like humans, but humans were also learning to think like galactic citizens. Maybe something good could come from all this destruction, if any of them survived long enough to see it. The Proxima system had been chosen as humanity's stand. It was strategically located at the junction of 3 major hyperspace routes, making it impossible for the Devourers to bypass. More importantly, it was expendable. If the battle went wrong, they wouldn't lose a populated world. Fleet Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, the newest and most advanced ship in the human fleet. Around him, his mixed-species crew worked with the efficiency born of desperation and months of intensive training. Zephyrian crystal engineers managed the exotic power systems. Hive Queen biotechnicians coordinated the organic components, and Human officers tied it all together with the chaotic adaptability that had become their trademark. "Contact," reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the sensor station. "Devourer fleet dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system." The main screen filled with dark shapes emerging from the void. Jake counted them methodically. 37 ships, each one larger than any vessel in his defense force. The Devourers had learned from their recent defeats and were bringing overwhelming numbers to this battle. "All units implement Chaos Protocol," Jake ordered into his communicator. "Remember, we're not here to win a fair fight. We're here to make them bleed." The human defense plan was unlike anything in galactic military history. Instead of forming a traditional battle line, their ships were scattered throughout the system. Hiding in asteroid fields, behind moons, even inside the outer atmosphere of gas giants. They looked disorganized and random, but every position had been carefully calculated. The Devourers approached Proxima Station with their usual confidence, their ships phasing in and out of normal space as they advanced. Their dark beams began, charging, preparing to drain the life from another human outpost. They never saw the first attack coming. Captain Nancy Brooks, commanding a rebuilt version of the Defender, emerged from the shadow of an asteroid with her entire squadron. Their phase-sync cannons fired in perfect coordination, catching 6 Devourer ships in the middle of a phase transition. The alien vessels, suddenly solid and vulnerable, were torn apart by kinetic rounds moving at significant fractions of light speed. Before the Devourers could react, Brooks' squadron vanished back into the asteroid field, leaving only wreckage behind. "First blood to us," Jake murmured, watching the tactical display. "Now, let's see how they adapt." The Devourers did adapt, faster than Jake had hoped. Their remaining ships spread out in a search pattern, their sensors probing every hiding spot in the system. But humans had been preparing for this moment for months. Commander Alex Turner led the second wave, his ships emerging from inside a nebula cloud where their energy signatures had been masked by natural radiation. His target was the Devourer command vessel, a massive ship that seemed to coordinate the other's movements. Turner's attack was a masterpiece of human tactical thinking. Instead of attacking the command ship directly, he targeted its escorts, forcing it to move into a predetermined position where Jake's main force was waiting. The trap was sprung perfectly. 20 human ships, their phase-sync weapons, locked onto. The command vessel's predicted position, fired simultaneously. The massive Devourer ship caught solid in normal space, took devastating damage, but it didn't go down. "That thing has armor like nothing we've seen," Turner reported over the communication channel. "Our weapons are hurting it, but not enough." Jake made a decision that would define the rest of the war. "Nancy, prepare your boarding teams. We're going inside." The idea was insane by any reasonable military standard. Boarding a Devourer ship was suicide. Their hulls existed partially outside normal reality. Their corridors were filled with psychic energy that could drive humans mad, and their crew were beings of pure malevolent intelligence. But Captain Brooks didn't hesitate. "Understood, Jake. Give us covering fire." The boarding assault was launched using a technique that only humans would have considered: ramming. The specially modified UES Spearhead, its hull reinforced and its crew wearing experimental phase dampener suits, smashed directly into the Devourer, command ship's hull. The impact forced both vessels fully into normal space, allowing Brooks and her Marines to storm aboard the alien ship. What they found inside was a nightmare of biological and mechanical components fused together into something that hurt to look at. The corridors twisted in ways that violated physics, bending back on themselves in impossible loops. The walls pulsed, with veins that carried not blood, but pure darkness. And everywhere, the psychic pressure of the devourer consciousness pressed against their minds like invisible hands trying to tear their sanity apart. "Stay together," Brooks ordered her team, through gritted teeth. "Don't look at the walls too long, and remember, what you're seeing isn't real." The phase dampener suits protected them from the worst effects, but Jake could hear the strain in their voices as they fought through the ship's interior. The Devourers hadn't expected borders, and their internal defenses were designed to drain life force, not stop armed humans in environmental suits. "Found something," reported Sergeant Amy Foster over the communication link. "Looks like a central core of some kind. It's organic." Jake watched through the helmet cameras as Brooks's team entered a vast chamber at the heart of the ship. The walls were lined with what looked like neurons the size of trees, all connected to a central mass of tissue that pulsed with dark energy. "That's how they coordinate," Dr. Rodriguez's voice came through the communication system. "It's a biological, computer processing information from across their entire fleet." "Can we destroy it?" Brooks asked. "Tony's quantum charges should do it," Jake replied. "But you need to get out of there fast. When that thing goes down, the whole ship will destabilize." Engineer Tony Stevens had prepared for this moment. His experimental quantum bombs were designed to disrupt the exotic matter that kept Devourer ships partially phased. When they detonated inside the central core, the effect was immediate and catastrophic. The massive command ship was forcibly pulled back into normal space-time, its hull buckling under physical laws it was never designed to handle. Secondary explosions rippled through its length as systems that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously collapsed into three. Brooks and her team barely made it back to their ship before the Devourer vessel tore itself apart. The explosion lit up the Proxima system like a second sun, and Jake felt a moment of savage satisfaction as he watched humanity's greatest enemy burn. But the victory came at a cost. The other Devourer ships, enraged by the loss of their command vessel, converged on the human fleet with unprecedented fury. Their attacks became wild and desperate, but also more dangerous. "They're not coordinating anymore," Lieutenant Kim reported. "But they're hitting harder than ever," Jake smiled grimly. "That's fine. Angry enemies make mistakes." The rest of the battle played out exactly as human doctrine predicted. Without their command ship to coordinate tactics, the Devourers fell back on instinct and aggression. They abandoned their careful phase-shifting patterns and came at the human fleet directly. It was exactly what Jake had hoped for. Human ships, designed for chaos and rapid maneuvering, tore the disorganized aliens apart. Phase-sync weapons found their targets with devastating accuracy, and kinetic rounds punched through hulls that had suddenly become vulnerable. When the last Devourer ship exploded, the Proxima system fell silent except for the cheers echoing across human communication channels. "All ships report," Jake ordered, hardly daring to believe what his sensors were telling him. One by one, his captains checked in. Damaged ships, wounded crews, but no total losses. For the first time since the war began, humanity had faced a major Devourer fleet and won without losing a single vessel. The news spread across the galaxy faster than hyperspace travel. The Devourers could be beaten, their ships could be boarded, their commanders could be killed. But Jake knew better than to celebrate too much. This had been a scouting force, not the main invasion fleet. Somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, Thousands more Devourer ships were probably already adapting to human tactics. Still, as he watched the wreckage of alien ships drifting in space, Jake allowed himself a moment of pride. The quiet humans that the Council had ignored were no longer quiet. They had found their voice, and it spoke in the language of kinetic weapons and controlled chaos. The galaxy was learning to listen. The emergency session of the reformed Galactic Council met in humanity's lunar headquarters, a fact that would have been unthinkable just a year earlier. The great powers of the galaxy now gathered in a simple conference room built inside Earth's moon, protected by human weapons and defended by human strategy. Fleet Admiral Jake Morrison, wearing the insignia of his new rank, stood before representatives of species that had once dismissed humanity as primitive. His uniform was still simple compared to their elaborate robes and ceremonial armor, but now it commanded respect that no amount of decoration could buy. The intelligence we've gathered from the Devourer command ship is worse than we feared. Jake began, activating the holographic display that showed Dr. Rodriguez's analysis. They're not just invading our galaxy. They've done this before thousands of times across millions of years. The display showed a map that hurt to look at. Vast regions of empty space where entire galactic clusters had once existed. Dark zones where billions of stars had been extinguished, their planets stripped of all life and left as barren rocks drifting in eternal night. Ambassador Crix's crystal body flickered with colors Jake had learned to recognize as deep fear. How many galaxies have they consumed? All of them. Dr. Rodriguez's voice came through the communication system from her laboratory on Earth. In this sector of the universe, we're the last one left. Everything else is just empty. The implications hit the assembled representatives like a physical blow. They weren't facing raiders or conquerors. They were facing a force of nature, an alien hunger that had been feeding on galactic civilizations since before their stars were born. There's more, Jake continued grimly. We now know why they accelerated. Their timeline. Our resistance at Proxima wasn't just a tactical victory. It was the first time in their recorded history that any species has destroyed one of their command ships. Queen Zatara's mandibles clicked nervously. You mean we've made them angry? Worse, Jake said. We've made them cautious. They're bringing their entire invasion fleet to this galaxy. Everything they have. Preliminary estimates suggest over 10,000 ships, each one larger and more powerful than anything we faced at Proxima. The silence in the room was deafening. Even with their recent victories, the combined fleets of all surviving species numbered fewer than 3,000 ships. They were outnumbered more than 3-1 by an enemy that had already proven nearly invincible. Chancellor Morp's mechanical voice box crackled as he spoke. What are our options? Jake looked around the room at beings who had spent months learning to think like humans, to fight like humans, to abandon their traditional ways in favor of chaotic survival. We need total integration, not cooperation, not alliance, complete unity under a single command structure. Human command, Minister Vex said, his ethereal voice resigned but not bitter. You're asking us to surrender our military independence. I'm asking you to live, Jake replied bluntly. The Devourers are bringing everything they have because they've learned to respect human tactics, but they still think like conquerors. They expect to face separate fleets fighting separate battles. If we can present them with something they've never encountered before, we might have a chance. Admiral Lisa Carter stepped forward, her weathered face serious. We're proposing the formation of the Galactic Defense Force, a single military organization with combined technology, unified tactics, and integrated crews. Human strategic doctrine, Zephyrian shield technology, Hive Queen bioships, ethereal energy weapons, all working together as one force. The council representatives exchanged glances, communicating in the subtle ways of species that had known each other for millennia. Finally, Ambassador Crick spoke for all of them. What guarantees do we have that humans won't use this authority to dominate the galaxy after the war? Jake almost smiled at the question. A year ago, these same beings had refused to grant humanity basic membership rights. Now they were worried about human domination. None, he said honestly. You'll have to trust us. Just like we had to trust you when we first asked to join the council. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. The species that had once declared humans too primitive for membership were now placing their survival in human hands. One by one, they agreed. The Zephyrians would share their advanced manufacturing technology and provide the exotic materials needed for phase-sync weapons. The Hive Queen would convert her breeding colonies into ship production facilities, cranking out vessels at a rate that would have been impossible with traditional manufacturing. The Ethereals offered something even more valuable, their ability. To exist as pure energy allowed them to interface directly with ship systems, creating a level of coordination between crew and vessel that had never been achieved before. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The Granite Lords, silicon-based beings who thought in geological timescales, revealed that they had been preparing for this moment for thousands of years. We saw the dark zones in distant space, rumbled Elder Stoneheart, his massive form carved from living rock. We knew something was coming. We have been building. The revelation was staggering. Hidden in asteroid fields and hollow moons throughout Granite Lord space were massive automated shipyards, powered by stellar energy and guided by artificial intelligences that had been working for millennia. They had built not just ships, but entire fleets in secret, waiting for a threat worthy of their release. Why didn't you tell anyone? Jake asked. Because you would have tried to use them for lesser wars, Elder Stoneheart replied. These ships were built for one purpose, to face the darkness between galaxies. That time has come. The next month became the most intense period of military preparation in galactic history. Human officers trained alien crews in advanced tactical doctrine, while alien engineers integrated their technologies into human ship designs. The result was vessels unlike anything the universe had ever seen. The new ships combined the best of every species. Hulls that could phase shift like devourer vessels, weapons that fired in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and crews that thought with human unpredictability while operating with alien precision. But Jake knew that technology alone wouldn't be enough. The real advantage lay in something the devourers had never encountered, a galaxy that fought as one. They've spent millions of years consuming civilizations that fought separately, he explained to his senior staff. Each species used their own tactics, their own weapons, their own command structure. Even when they formed alliances, they remained fundamentally separate. And were different how? Asked Captain Brooks, now commanding one of the new integrated vessels. Because we're not an alliance, Jake said. We're something new. Humans thinking with Zephyrian logic. Ethereals fighting with Hive Queen instincts. Granite Lords adapting at human speed. We're becoming something that evolution never intended. A true galactic consciousness. The proof came during the final training exercises. Ships crewed by multiple. Species moved with a coordination that seemed almost telepathic. Human tactical officers made decisions that alien crew members executed with perfect understanding. Alien technologies responded to human intuition as if they had been designed for it. Dr. Rodriguez, studying the phenomenon from her research station, called it convergent evolution in real time. Different species adapting to each other so rapidly that they were becoming something entirely new. But there was no more time for analysis. Long-range sensors were detecting massive hyperspace distortions at the edge of the galaxy. The Devourer invasion fleet was coming, and they were bringing everything they had ever built. Jake stood on the bridge of the new flagship, no longer called by any single species naming convention, but simply designated as Unity, and watched the final preparations. Around him, beings who had once been enemies now worked together with a harmony that seemed impossible. "All fleets report ready," Admiral Carter announced from the tactical center. Jake nodded, looking out at the stars that had become humanity's responsibility to protect. "Then let's show the universe what happens when the quiet ones decide to make some noise." The final battle for the galaxy was about to begin. At the heart of the construct, they found the Overmind itself, a vast biological computer that spanned kilometers and existed partially in dozens of dimensions simultaneously. It was ancient beyond measure, its consciousness so alien that direct contact with it caused temporary madness in even the best protected minds. But Jake had prepared for this moment. Following the Marines through their helmet cameras, he coordinated the placement of Dr. Rodriguez's dimensional charges while staying connected to the Unity's tactical systems. "Charges placed," Brooks reported, her voice strained from the psychic pressure. "Get us out of here, Jake!" 30 seconds, Jake replied, watching the countdown on his display. "Elena, this had better work." "It'll work," Dr. Rodriguez said with more confidence than she felt. "The question is whether we'll survive what happens next." The dimensional charges detonated simultaneously, each one opening a rift between the normal universe and the void spaces where the Overmind existed. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The massive biomechanical construct was forcibly pulled into normal space-time, its vast bulk suddenly subject to physical laws it had evolved to ignore. The psychic scream that followed could be felt across the entire system. Every Devourer ship stopped moving as their central intelligence died, their coordinated tactics dissolving into chaos as individual vessels found themselves cut off from the collective mind that had guided them for millions of years. All units! All units!" Jake broadcast across the fleet. "The Overmind is down! Press the attack!" What followed was less a battle than a slaughter. Devourer ships, suddenly reduced to individual units without coordination or central command, were picked apart by the coordinated galactic fleet. Phase-sync weapons found their marks with devastating accuracy, and kinetic rounds punched through hulls that no longer had the support of the collective intelligence. Some Devourer vessels tried to retreat, but human pursuit doctrine, the void between galactic arms, had never seen anything like the force that emerged from hyperspace. 10,000 Devourer ships materialized in perfect formation, their dark hulls absorbing the light of distant stars until space itself seemed to bleed darkness. Each vessel was the size of a small moon, carrying within it the accumulated hunger of millions of years. Grand Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Unity, watching the enemy fleet through sensors that combined human engineering with alien perception. Around him, his integrated crew worked with the fluid coordination of a single organism. Zephyrian crystal engineers managing power flows, Hive Queen biotechnicians coordinating organic systems, ethereal navigators plotting courses through multiple dimensions simultaneously. Enemy fleet is holding position at the edge of the system, reported Commander Sarah Kim, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they faced. They're scanning us. Jake nodded grimly. The Devourers had learned caution from their previous encounters with human forces. They were taking time to analyze the Galactic Defense Fleet, trying to understand what they were facing. What they saw would confuse them. Instead of the orderly battle formations they expected from civilized species, the Galactic Fleet was scattered across light years of space in what appeared to be random clusters. Ships hid in nebulae, behind asteroids, even inside the coronas of nearby stars. To alien minds that thought in terms of formal military doctrine, it looked like chaos. All units, this is Unity Actual, Jake broadcast on the encrypted channel that connected every ship in the Galactic Fleet. Remember, we're not fighting their war. We're not meeting them in honorable battle. We're hunting them. The response came from 3,000 ships spread across the system. Human voices, alien voices, mechanical translators, and bio-organic communication systems all speaking as one. Understood, Unity Actual. Begin the hunt. The Devourers made their first mistake by advancing in traditional formation. Their massive ships moved forward in precise lines, their weapons charging for the overwhelming alpha strike that had destroyed every civilization they had ever encountered. They never saw the first attack coming. Captain Nancy Brooks led strike. Group Alpha from inside a stellar debris field, her squadron of 30 ships emerging like ghosts from the cosmic dust. But these weren't the simple kinetic weapons of human design anymore. These were integrated systems that fired in dimensions the Devourers didn't even know existed. The phase-sync cannons had evolved beyond mere timing. They now punched holes in reality itself, creating dimensional rifts that pulled Devourer ships into normal space, where they became vulnerable to conventional attack. When Brooks's squadron fired, 12 enemy vessels simply ceased to exist as stable entities, their hulls scattered across multiple dimensions. Before the Devourers could react, Strike Group Alpha vanished back into the debris field, leaving only expanding clouds of exotic matter where their targets had been. First blood, Jake murmured, then raised his voice to address the fleet. All groups, execute Chaos Protocol 7. Make them chase shadows. What followed was warfare unlike anything in galactic history. The combined fleet didn't fight as separate units supporting each other. They fought as a single organism with 3,000 claws striking from every direction at once. Zephyrian crystal ships emerged from hyperspace already firing, their advanced shields allowing them to survive return fire long enough to deliver devastating strikes before jumping away. Hive Queen bio-vessels swarmed around larger Devourer ships like angry insects, their organic hulls regenerating damage faster than the aliens could inflict it. Ethereal energy beings abandoned their physical vessels entirely, attacking the Devourers. Psychic networks directly, while Granite Lord Fortress ships materialized from asteroid belts where they had been hiding for centuries. But it was the integrated crews that made the real difference. Ships with human tactical officers thinking in 3 dimensions while alien engineers worked in 12. Captains who combined species-specific intuition with cross-trained knowledge of technologies their own people had never dreamed of. The Devourers adapted quickly, but for the first time in their existence, they were adapting to something that was adapting back. Every tactical modification they made was countered within minutes by crews that thought faster than any single species could manage. They're trying to reform their battle line, reported Commander Alex Turner from the Tactical Center. Pulling their ships back into defensive formation. Don't let them, Jake ordered. All groups maintain pressure. If they get organized, we lose our advantage. The battle raged across the entire system, ship-to-ship combats that spanned light minutes and lasted for hours. Jake watched from Unity's bridge as impossible maneuvers played out on the tactical display. Human unpredictability guided by alien precision. Alien technology directed by human stubbornness. The turning point came when Dr. Elena Rodriguez made a discovery that changed everything. Jake, I've been analyzing their communication patterns. Her voice came through the ship's communication system from her laboratory aboard the research vessel Discovery. They're not just coordinating through technology. There's a biological component, something that exists partially outside normal space-time. The overmind, Jake realized. They have a central intelligence directing their entire fleet. More than that, Dr. Rodriguez continued excitedly. I think I've found it. There's a massive biomechanical construct at the center of their formation. It's the size of a small planet, but it's phased mostly out of our dimension. That's why our sensors barely detect it. Jake felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. That's their weakness. Cut off the head. Kill the snake. Jake, no. Admiral Carter's voice came from the tactical center. That thing is protected by their entire fleet. It's suicide to go after it directly. Not directly, Jake said, his mind racing through possibilities. We do what humans do best. We cheat. The plan was insane even by human standards. Instead of fighting through the Devourer fleet to reach their command center, Jake proposed to bring the command center to them. Elena, can your dimensional charges destabilize that construct's phase shifting? He asked. Theoretically, yes, but I'd need to plant them directly on the biomechanical surface. Someone would have to board that thing. That's what I was hoping. You'd say, Jake said grimly. Nancy, prepare your best boarding teams. We're going hunting. The assault was launched using every trick humanity had learned in their months of fighting the Devourers. Stealth ships approached the construct while the main fleet created diversions across the system. Phase dampener technology allowed the boarding craft to partially exist outside normal space, making them nearly invisible to Devourer sensors. Captain Brooks led the assault personally, her Marines equipped with weapons that fired in multiple dimensions and armor that could exist in several phases of reality simultaneously. When they breached the construct's hull, they found themselves inside something that was part starship, part living organism, and part nightmare from dimensions that human minds weren't designed to comprehend. The interior defenses were beyond anything they had faced. Corridors that led in impossible directions, gravity that shifted without warning, and walls that bled psychic energy designed to drive intruders insane. But the Marines pressed on, guided by Dr. Rodriguez's remote analysis, and protected by technology that combined human engineering with alien science.